The shimmering gold of the chandeliers cast a dazzling glow over the grand hall of the palace, but no amount of luxury could brighten the storm brewing behind the billionaire sheikh's eyes. 20 blind dates, 20, had walked away with nothing but polite smiles and unspoken disdain. His customary aura of invincibility was cracking, his pride bruised by rejection after rejection. For a man who commanded empires, this felt like an unbearable humiliation. The Emirate's endless desert stretched beyond the palace walls, its silent sands a stark contrast to the opulence inside. Rich tapestries adorned the walls, intricate Persian rugs muffled footsteps, and the air was heavy with the exotic scent of saffron and burning oud. But none of these extravagances could mask the growing emptiness the sheikh felt. He stood beside a window draped with silk, his gaze falling on the vast horizon. His sharp features were carved with quiet torment, arrogance and vulnerability warring beneath his meticulously tailored robes, embroidered with gold thread. The man who had everything was now haunted by one question. What if all the admiration he was used to was just a mirage? Just then, an uncommon invitation stirred a fragile hope. The miner, the woman who refused luxury, who understood the grind of dirt and sweat rather than silk and jewels, had accepted to meet him. She was a stark contrast to his world. Calloused hands, a face mapped by resilience, eyes steady with quiet determination. Unlike the others, she did not flinch before his fame or fortune. Their first meeting was an uneven dance of worlds colliding. The sheikh's confidence radiated like a shield, yet underneath it stirred a sea of emotions, bewilderment, a hesitant intrigue, and something dangerously close to admiration. The miner met his gaze with steady calm, her silence a mystery he couldn't unravel, her simple attire and rough demeanor challenging his every preconception. "Why did you say yes?" he finally asked, his voice low but edged with disbelief. She lifted her chin, a shadow of a smile teasing her lips. "Because I saw the man, not the title." His surprise twisted into something unspoken. Could a soul molded by hardship see through the veneer of power? Their words were few, but charged. Every glance, every quiet breath spoke volumes. Strange warmth brushed the edges of his heart as he caught himself wanting to know more, to understand the secrets behind her guarded smile. But just a fragile bridge between them began to form. The miner's demeanor shifted. A flicker of pain clouded her eyes, a careful avoidance of his gaze as she suddenly excused herself. Later, the silent corridor whispered its truth, a whispered fragment of a secret she desperately tried to hide. In that moment, the billionaire sheikh felt the world tilt. Was this simple woman so different and yet so compelling, carrying a truth that might shatter not only their budding connection, but the very foundations of his sheltered existence? Before the next secret of this emirate unfolds, make sure you're part of our caravan of stories. Many fates are yet to be decided, and I don't want you to miss a single moment. Leave a like if this sheikh's heart has already intrigued you. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching this saga from, and what twist do you think is coming? Your passion for these dramas inspires us to keep going. Thank you for being with us. The moon, carved silver lines across the palace walls, but inside, shadows clung more tightly than ever. The Billionaire Sheikh stood motionless near the ornate window. The desert night stretched endless beyond, yet his mind was shackled within the labyrinth of unfamiliar feelings the miner had stirred. That brief encounter, their silent dialogue, the steady calm in her gaze, refused to loosen its grip on his reason. He could still see her rugged hands, the hands that had toiled in the earth, while his had only touched silk or gold. Such contrast should have driven an unbridgeable wedge between them. Yet, inexplicably, instead of contempt, he felt a pull, as if some part of his soul recognized something long buried beneath his layers of pride. The vast hall remained deserted, opulence fading into cold solitude. His advisors' voices, urgent and persistent, echoed faintly from distant chambers, reminding him of the relentless politics he was expected to master. Yet, the Sheikh's thoughts were elsewhere, caught in the tension between his world of power and the raw sincerity embodied by the woman who had dared to meet him, not as a ruler, but as a man. Why? The single word slipped from his lips like a whisper, revealing more vulnerability than he intended. The miner's voice echoed softly behind him. Because beneath all your riches, you seemed alone. He turned sharply to find her standing there, framed by the glow of the lanterns, her eyes reflecting a storm of emotions, defiance, sorrow, and an unyielding strength that unsettled the very ground beneath his feet. She had returned, despite the walls he built around himself, walls carved by years of betrayal and the coldness demanded by his title. But now, confronted by her authenticity, those defenses felt untenable. "Emotions are your weakness," he said harshly, stepping closer, his breath mingling with hers in the heavy air. "Perhaps," she replied, eyes steady. "Or maybe they're our only truth." The words hung between them, shimmering like the gilded frames that surrounded priceless portraits, a fragile contrast to the fierce sincerity in her tone. Before the Sheikh could respond, footsteps broke the charged silence. A whisper, barely contained, slipped through the door, an urgent summons. His trusted aide bowed quickly. "Sheikh, there's news from the mines. We must speak." The miner's eyes flickered with unease, though she masked it swiftly behind a composed mask. His pulse quickened as he watched her retreating figure, sensing the distance creeping between them once again. In the private quarters that bore the marks of generations, the Sheikh listened as the aide relayed troubling reports. A recent accident in the mines had left several workers injured, reigniting unrest among the laborers, an unstable situation threatening not only his wealth, but the fragile trust of the people who fed his empire. Anguish tightened in his chest. The miner wasn't just a symbol of stubborn defiance. She was now intricately linked to this turmoil. Her world was bleeding into his, exposing fissures he had long ignored. Days passed in a whirlwind of secrets and shadows. The Sheikh found himself haunted by visions of the miner, her resilience beneath the dirt-streaked skin, her steady refusal to be broken. She was a puzzle he was desperate to solve, a flame he couldn't extinguish. Rumors whispered through the palace corridors. Some courtiers mocked his fascination, calling it foolishness. Others warned of scandal if such a woman disturbed the emirate's delicate balance. Yet none could assail the growing crack in the Sheikh's impenetrable armor. One evening, beneath the vast expanse of a starlit sky, the Sheikh descended to the margins of his kingdom, where the desert met the dust-choked mine. His presence was unexpected, stirring curiosity and suspicion among the workers. There, among the rough hands and weary faces, he sought the miner. She stood near a cluster of tents, eyes narrowing upon his approach, lips pressed thin in guarded mistrust. "You promised to show me your truth," he said quietly, voice rough with unfamiliar humility. Her gaze pierced him. "Truth is a heavy burden. Can you carry it?" He met her challenge with a rare openness. "I do not yet know, but I want to." Together, they walked through the camp, the air thick with sweat and worry. He heard their stories, fears unspoken at court, the hunger to be seen beyond servitude. With each tale, the opulent walls of his palaces seemed more like cages, and the miner's world, though harsh, was undeniably alive. Night crept in, and as they reached the edge of a quiet fire, the miner spoke softly, voice trembling, revealing a piece of the secret she had long abandoned. "They say my family carries a curse, that I am marked by misfortune. That's why I hid my past." The Sheikh's eyes darkened, searching her face for the shadows she tried to keep hidden. "Do you believe in curses?" he asked. Her laugh was bitter but honest. "I believe in pain, in loss, and in the price we pay for the sins of others." A heavy silence settled between them, fragile and pregnant with meaning. Their worlds, once galaxies apart, now overlapped in pain and desire. As the first light of dawn crept over the dunes, the Sheikh reached out, fingers trembling, catching hers. Something fierce and raw surged between them, a silent vow wrapped in uncertainty. But before words could bridge the growing chasm, a figure stepped from the darkness, a face marked by disdain and old rivalries, eyes burning with bitter intent. "Your Highness," the voice was laced with venom. "There's news you must hear, not from your advisors, but from the shadows you ignore." The Sheikh's gaze hardened. The delicate thread connecting him to the woman whom fate had cruelly entangled was now threatened by forces that sought to destroy everything, even before their story could begin. The desert wind howled, carrying secrets on its breath, and the Sheikh understood. The true battle was only just beginning. The stranger's voice sliced through the stillness of the desert night like a dagger. The billionaire Sheikh's breath hitched, eyes narrowing as he turned toward the speaker. The man, clad in the faded robes of a courtier, yet marked by an unmistakable air of menace, stepped forward slowly, shadows playing cruel games across his sharp features. "What is it?" The Sheikh's tone was a low growl, every inch the ruler forced into steel despite the turmoil inside. The man's voice dropped to a whisper. "Word has come from the East Wing. Something unsettling. Something you must see with your own eyes." His gaze lingered on the miner, still standing at the edge of the firelight, her expression unreadable, but her body taut with tension. A sudden cold gust swept through the camp, carrying with it the scent of sand and distant smoke. The Sheikh's pulse thundered in his ears as he stepped forward, a whisper of silk against marble. His hand brushed lightly against the miner's, the brief contact sparking a warmth that defied the chill in the air. Yet even that fragile tether stretched thinner by the news that awaited him. They moved together toward the palace, the grandeur of his world waiting silently. But behind the gilded walls, the veneer of control was already cracking. The East Wing, once a place of opulence and royal splendor, now hummed with a darker energy. The Sheikh's sharp eyes caught the flicker of flickering lanterns as he approached, the air heavy with whispers and half-spoken fears. His footsteps echoed down the long corridor, the polished stones cold beneath his heels. "Explain," he commanded, voice steady but laced with an urgent edge. The messenger dismounted a small handheld device, scrolling furiously. "Reports confirm unrest in the mines, Sheikh. Another collapse, a cave-in, several workers trapped. It's spreading fear among the laborers. There are rumors of sabotage." The words landed between them like a fatal blow. The miner's breath hitched, her jaw clenched tight as if fighting back an ache she refused to show. She met his gaze then, eyes shining with a fierce storm of resilience and pain. "You must understand," she said quietly, voice raw. "This isn't just work to them. It's survival. And when people feel unheard, desperation breeds dangerous things." The Sheikh's fingers clenched into fists, the weight of his empire suddenly feeling less like power and more like a cage. "Have you heard this rumor of sabotage from reliable sources?" he asked, steeling himself. The messenger nodded, grimly. "Unverified, but growing. If left unchecked, it could spiral into rebellion." He turned away, pacing the length of the shadowed hall, the silk of his robes whispering secrets to the stones. The miner's words echoed in his mind. Survival, desperation, unheard voices. For the first time, the gulf between his life of luxury and her world of hardship yawned wide. And menacing. Night deepened, swallowing the light from torches, and still the Sheikh's thoughts churned. The burden of leadership pressed heavy, but beneath that burden beat a heart increasingly restless and uncertain. Later, in the privacy of his chambers, the Sheikh stood before a mirror framed in intricate gold. His reflection stared back, eyes sharp and calculating, marked by a sadness few had witnessed. He traced the edge of his jaw, his mind returning again to the miner and her secret curse. Was it the weight of her past that haunted her gaze, or something darker still? A soft knock pulled him from the spiral. His trusted aide, gaunt and serious, entered bearing a sealed letter. The Sheikh broke the seal, fingers trembling slightly as he read. The words inside painted a grim picture, a whispered plot within his own court, a conspiracy weaving through the very halls where trust was supposed to dwell. Names were left unsaid, but the implication was clear. Enemies lurked close, waiting for a misstep to bring ruin. The room seemed to shrink around him. Paranoia, that old companion, stirred once more. Yet beneath that, a growing clarity. If his empire was to survive this tempest, he would need allies he had never imagined before. The miner's image burned behind his eyes, a beacon in the swirling darkness. Her strength, born from the earth itself, might be the key to turning the tide. The next morning dawned harsh and unforgiving. The sun's rays beat down over the desert, casting long shadows across the encampment. At the mine's edge, the sheikh arrived, his presence commanding silence. Workers whispered behind, their eyes wide with curiosity and suspicion. The miner watched him approach, her stance wary but not hostile. For once, the veil of silence between them lifted as she spoke, voice steady despite the undercurrent of tension. "You came back," she said simply. "And I will come as often as I must," he replied. "No more secrets between us, no more worlds apart." Her eyes searched his, weighing the truth of his words. Slowly, the faintest smile, vulnerable and fragile, broke across her face. Together, they walked among the tents, listening to the voices of those who toiled beneath the unforgiving sun. Stories spilled forth, fear, hope, anger, and beneath it all, a stubborn longing to be seen as more than shadows. As the sun dipped behind the distant dunes, the miner paused beside an aged tent, her face clouded with unspoken sorrow. "There is one last truth you must know," she whispered, voice barely audible over the desert breeze. "My past is not only cursed, but stained by betrayal. Someone close to me, someone I trusted, betrayed us all." The sheikh felt the air tighten. The promise of their fragile alliance, of something deeper, paled in the face of this revelation. Before he could ask the name that burned at the edge of her confession, the rustle of fabric and hurried footsteps shattered the moment. A shadow detached itself from the darker recesses of the camp. A man whose smile was a blade, masked in silk. "Your Highness," he said with cold mockery, "it seems the curse you fear is far closer to home than you imagine." The sheikh's eyes flickered with ice as the man's words cut into the night, and a chilling realization settled over him. The true enemy had been within all along, and the next move would determine whether love or betrayal would claim the throne. The wind howled around the silent watchers as dread wrapped tightly around the heart of the billionaire sheikh. And beneath the stars, a single, shattering secret waited to be unleashed. The tension in the palace air was palpable, thick like the heady scent of oud that clung to the heavy silk curtains. The billionaire sheikh's mind raced as he strode through the dimly lit corridors, the echo of urgent footsteps his only company. The weight of the sealed letter and the messenger's cryptic words pressed on him relentlessly. Enemies lurked not only beyond the shining sands of his empire, but within the gilded walls he called home. Yet despite the shadows of betrayal creeping through his court, his thoughts drifted persistently back to the miner. Her defiant gaze, the strength she wielded so effortlessly beneath worn hands, the fragile bridge forming between their worlds. She had become an unexpected ember in his cold fortress of solitude, stirring feelings he scarcely understood, but could no longer deny. In the private sanctum of his chambers, The sheikh paused before the ornate mirror framed in swirling gold and lapis, his reflection fractured by the flickering candlelight. His eyes, sharp and piercing, bore the burden of a man torn between duty and desire. The mask of invincibility faltered, as a flicker of doubt crept into his gaze, the echo of the miner's voice whispering through his thoughts. Emotions or your weakness, or maybe there are only truth. A soft knock interrupted the heavy silence. His trusted aide entered quietly, bearing messages that pulled the sheikh back to the labyrinth of politics and peril. Reports of unrest deepened, another collapse in the mines. Rumors of sabotage growing louder with each passing hour. The fragile balance of his empire teetered on the edge of chaos. The sheikh's jaw tightened as he listened, the grand weight of leadership settling like armor around him once more. But beneath that armored exterior, a vulnerability lingered. The secret fracture in his soul she had glimpsed during their first encounter. He stepped from his chambers, the palace now awash in the cool light of dawn, filtering through arched windows. The desert beyond awaited, vast and unyielding, mirroring the turmoil within him. His arrival at the miners' encampment was met with hushed murmurs and wary eyes. The air was thick with dust and the raw scent of earth. A world so distant from his own, yet now tangled irrevocably with his fate. The sheikh moved forward, his gaze searching for the woman who had already become his rarest truth. She stood near the flickering firelight, the lines of exhaustion and defiance etched deep into her face. Their eyes met, steady, unflinching. No titles, no shields, just two souls amidst a desert storm. "You came back," she said simply, voice rough but steady. "I must," he admitted, his voice low, raw with newfound humility. "No more walls between us." Her lips curved in a faint, fleeting smile, as fragile as desert flowers blooming in drought. Together, they walked among the gathered workers, listening to stories wrought from hardship, tales of fear, betrayal, hope, and quiet dignity. As the sky deepened into hues of violet and gold, she led him to the shadowed edge of camp, where an ancient tent stood weathered by years of hardship. Her voice fell to a whisper as she revealed a truth darker than the night itself. "My family carries a curse," she confessed, eyes haunted by memories she fought to bury. "But the curse isn't just in the old tales. It's in the betrayal, the treachery of one I trusted with my life." The sheikh's breath caught. A sinister silence stretched between them, the desert wind stirring restless echoes. Before words could find their way, a presence shattered the fragile moment. From the shadows emerged a man whose smile was sharpened like a blade. Eyes gleaming with cold malice. "Your Highness," the man's tone was laced with venom. "The curse you fear is not a legend far away. It dwells within these very walls." The sheikh's gaze hardened, ice settling in his veins. The web of deceit was closer than he dared admit, threading through his home, threatening to unravel everything he had built. He took a measured step forward, fingers curling into fists. The woman who had opened a window to his heart stood beside him. Her quiet strength, a stark contrast to the man who sought to poison their fragile alliance. As the desert night deepened, the palace once again seemed like a cage, grand but suffocating, filled with whispers of betrayal and dashed hopes. Yet beneath the weight of looming threats, a fierce resolve began to kindle in the Sheikh's heart. He would no longer be a prisoner of his own pride or the ghosts of his past. For the first time, he faced a choice that transcended power or wealth. The path toward redemption, forged not in gold or silk, but in trust, scars, and the tentative hope of a love that dared to grow in the shadow of treachery. But the true enemy was still hidden in the shadows. And as the last stars flickered before dawn, a chilling voice echoed through the palace walls, one that would no longer be silenced. "Your reign is only just beginning, Sheikh," it hissed. "But so is your destruction." The silence that followed was suffocating, the promise of war sinking like venom into the night. And beneath the moon's cold gaze, the billionaire Sheikh knew the battle for his heart and his empire had only just begun. The palace breathed a cold, indifferent silence, the weight of betrayal and dread pressing down like the desert heat outside. The billionaire Sheikh stood rigid, his silhouette framed by the fractured moonlight streaming through the tall windows. His gaze, once sharp and unyielding, now wrestled with shadows he hadn't anticipated. Shadows cast not only by his enemies, but by the fragile hope the miner had ignited in his heart. The venomous words of the intruder echoed relentlessly in his mind. A curse, a betrayal from within, a deadly game played beneath the gilded facade. His fingers curled tightly, knuckles whitening against the smooth marble table. Everything he had built, the grandeur, the power, his legacy, balanced on a thin thread of trust, now frayed dangerously. He turned, his eyes seeking the woman who had bared her scars and secrets so bravely. The miner stood not far away, her expression unreadable. But the flicker of pain lurking beneath her steady veil was undeniable. For her, this was more than political intrigue. It was personal. Her past, stitched with betrayal and curse, was now intertwined with the fate of his empire, and perhaps the fate of his heart. "Tell me everything you know," he commanded softly, his voice rough with a tension that betrayed his calm exterior. She stepped forward, the faintest tremble in her jaw betraying the burden she carried. The betrayal did not come from some faceless shadow. It sprang from a wound too close to ignore. Someone trusted, someone with power over both the palace and the mines. Her eyes darkened with sorrow. "They have poisoned the well from which your reign draws strength." The Sheikh's breath hitched, the palace suddenly feeling too vast, empty, as if the walls themselves were listening, waiting. The air thickened with the scent of night-blooming jasmine and caution. For the first time in a long while, the invincible ruler found himself vulnerable, not just to the enemies outside, but to the riveting woman whose truth unsettled his soul. "Why did you come to me?" His question was fierce, demanding, not in anger, but in desperate curiosity. Her glance did not waver. "Because despite it all, you listened. You saw me, not the wealth, not the title, but the woman beneath. A fragile bridge, a flicker of trust, formed in that moment between them. It was as if the palace itself exhaled, the oppressive atmosphere softening just enough to let a breath of sincerity pass. But the sanctity of that moment was shattered. A sharp rap at the door. The trusted aide entered, eyes shadowed but resolute. "Your Highness, new intelligence has arrived. The conspiracy runs deeper, entwining alliances you have never expected." But Sheikh's jaw clenched again. There was no room for mistakes, no time for hesitation. Yet beneath the surface, a turbulent storm of emotion churned. Fear, hope, and the dangerous promise of something more than power. Love. As the aide unrolled a parchment, the Sheikh's eyes scanned the sinister plot. Names, places, veiled threats. But one phrase marked itself in his mind. A name, whispered with venom in the corridors of the court. A name connected not only to the cursed past of the miner, but to a betrayal that could topple his empire. He pressed the parchment into his palm, the paper trembling slightly, like the fragile alliance he had begun to build. The miner's gaze slipped to the document, her breath hilting at the mention. A secret she had fought to bury surged to the surface. "You knew this before we met," he said quietly, anger threading beneath the calm. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Her voice was barely audible. "Fear. Because telling you meant exposing everything, which could have destroyed us both." They stood in tense silence, a fragile truce of shared pain and mutual suspicion. Outside, the desert winds howled, carrying distant echoes of unrest. The mines groaned below the surface, mirroring the unrest bubbling beneath the royal court. Neither the lavish golden chandeliers nor the intricate Persian tapestries could mask the raw truth. Simmering in the palace walls, hours later, the Sheikh found himself alone on the terrace, the desert night embracing him in its eerie stillness. The stars blinked cold and distant, indifferent to mortal dramas. His mind traced every whispered secret, every stolen glance with the miner. A sudden breath of warm air shifted his thoughts. He hadn't realized she had returned until her silhouette emerged from the shadows. The flicker of candlelight, casting soft light across her weathered features. "I cannot untangle this alone," she admitted, her voice fragile yet resolute. "The enemy is both outside and within. You must choose. Trust might be your greatest weapon or your deepest weakness." The Sheikh inhaled, the scent of sandalwood from her cloak filling his senses. He reached for her hand without hesitation, the roughness of her skin. Stark against his silken touch. It was a touch heavy with promise and peril. "We fight this together," he vowed, voice low and steady. "No more secrets, no more walls." For a moment, the desert wind carried a silent hope, as if the sprawling sands themselves held their breath. But then, from the darkened archway behind them, a cold voice sliced the fragile peace. "Trust is a luxury you cannot afford, Sheikh." They froze, eyes snapping toward the speaker. A figure stepped forward, cloaked in shadows, but unmistakable. One of the highest courtiers, his smile a deadly razor concealed beneath an elegant mask. His eyes gleamed with the poison of ambition. The curse you fear is not some superstition. It lies in betrayal you never saw coming, in alliances forged with the dagger, not the crown. The Sheikh's gaze hardened, the flicker of vulnerability vanishing like smoke. In that instant, every fracturing piece of his world snapped into place. This was not merely a battle for power or love, but a war where every choice could mean survival or ruin. As the stranger's words hung heavy in the cold night air, the miner's hand tightened around his, a silent pact forged in fire and shadow. The winds roared louder, sweeping through the palace as if heralding the storm to come. And beneath the glittering chandeliers and endless desert sky, the billionaire sheikh understood the brutal truth with chilling clarity. His throne, his heart, and the fragile hope stirring between them were all at the mercy of a secret that could ignite the final, devastating war. The moonlight spilled cold and silver against the marbled floors, casting long, wavering shadows that seemed to crawl through the palace halls like silent witnesses to the weaving intrigue. The billionaire sheikh's eyes burned with a fierce resolve as he confronted the man who dared unveil the venom lurking so close. The courtier stepped forward, his smile sharp, his gaze riddled with concealed malice. Yet the sheikh did not flinch. Years of ruling with an iron fist had learned him how to mask fear with authority. But tonight, beneath the polished grandeur, something far more fragile trembled. "Your revelations speak of a betrayal within," the sheikh said, voice low and steady. "Name the traitor." The man's eyes sparkled with cruel satisfaction. "Not yet, Your Highness, but the web tightens around those who would stand by you. Trust is your fragility." The words echoed in the silent room, each syllable a blade slicing through the cold air. The miner stood near, her expression fixed but betraying a flicker of concern. She had stepped into the very heart of the storm, and the weight of her past now intertwined with the sheikh's turbulent reign. The emir's gaze shifted to her. "You speak of curses and betrayal. I need to understand everything. No more secrets." She nodded, the faintest tremor in her breath betraying years of hidden pain. "There's a name you must hear soon. Someone from the palace, close to your throne. They betrayed not only me, but countless others. The price we've paid, it's unimaginable." The sheikh's jaw clenched. The air felt thick with unspoken threats, the scent of amber and oud blending with the metallic bite of impending danger. Outside, the desert night was silent, yet inside, the palace roared with unheard conspiracies. "Then we face this enemy together," he vowed, stepping closer, the heat between them unspoken but undeniable. The miner's steady eyes met his, their alliance forged in shadows and promises. Suddenly, the heavy oak door burst open. A fleet-footed aide appeared, his face pale but resolved. "Your Highness, there is news from the northern watchtower, urgent and unexpected." A tense glance passed between the sheikh and the miner. The fragile thread of tentative trust was about to be tested again. The aide's voice was tight as he spoke. A caravan was found abandoned, its cargo missing. Among the wreckage, signs of sabotage hint at someone within your ranks working against you. The sheikh's expression darkened, the weight of empire and betrayal pressing fiercely on. His broad shoulders. Such treason, he murmured, must be extinguished before it consumes us all. He turned away, the silk of his robes whispering secrets, footsteps echoing in the cavernous hall. The miner followed, her presence a silent defiance amidst the gathering storm. Hours later, cloaked in the stillness of night, the sheikh wandered to the palace terrace. The stars wheeled overhead, cold and distant as the truths he sought to grasp. Memories of the miner's rough hands, her fierce gaze, and the heavy burden she carried clawed at his resolve. She approached softly, the desert breeze wrapping around her like a shroud. This battle, it's bigger than either of us. He reached for her hand, the contrast of his velvet sleeve against her weathered skin, sending a jolt through his veins. Then we stand, as one. No more walls, no more lies. Her eyes shimmered, vulnerable yet fierce. Trust is a gamble when shadows linger so close. A silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken fears and a fragile hope. Then, a sudden chill swept the terrace as a dark figure emerged, a whisper of menace amid the night. Sheikh, the greatest threat is not the enemies you see, but those who wear the crown alongside you. The voice hissed, cold as desert night. The sheikh's grip tightened around the miner's hand. The line between ally and foe blurred, and in that moment he understood the war ahead was not just for his empire, but for his heart. The desert wind carried their silent vow as the palace trembled under the weight of secrets yet to be revealed, and beneath the endless stars, the billionaire sheikh faced a reckoning that would shatter all illusions. For in the dance of power and passion, the final move belonged to an unseen hand, one that held the fate of love, loyalty, and life in its unforgiving grasp. The distant sky began to pale, the first hesitant fingers of dawn stretching like weary tendrils over the desert's endless stretch. Inside the grand halls of the palace, the gold and silk seemed heavier, weighed down by secrets and threats unseen yet deeply felt. The billionaire sheikh stood alone in the shadowed alcove overlooking the sprawling city, a monarch not just of land and wealth, but of fragile trust and looming betrayal. His eyes, dark pools swirling with storm and flame, searched the horizon as if seeking answers from the shifting sands themselves. The weight of recent revelations bore down on him with crushing certainty. A traitor lurked close, one cloaked not by distance, but by familiarity and false loyalty. He turned sharply as soft footsteps approached, the presence both known and unexpected. The miner, the woman who had broken through his fortress of solitude with nothing but unflinching honesty and undeniable strength, now made her way toward him. Her face was pale in the early light, her eyes shadowed by sleepless nights and guarded hopes. But beneath that weary shell burned a fierce determination. "Still standing," she said quietly, her voice threading through the heavy silence like a balm. He gave a fleeting, tight smile, the kind that carried the exhaustion of a man fighting battles on all fronts. "There is no other choice." She took a hesitant step closer, the rough texture of her hand brushing against the fabric of his sleeve. "You walk a dangerous path, Your Highness. Betrayal is a venom that can seep into every corner. And trust. Trust is the rarest treasure. He swallowed hard, recalling the venomous words spoken but hours before. The web inside his court twisted tighter, each thread promising to swallow what little peace remained. I will root out this poison, no matter the cost, but I no longer wish to walk that path alone. Her steady gaze met his, unyielding and clear. Then we fight together, not just for the empire, but for the truth buried beneath the gold and power. A flicker of warmth, strange and unsettling, touched his chest. It was fragile, a candle fighting the desert wind, but enough to ignite a new resolve. As if on command, a distant horn echoed softly through the palace grounds, a summons woven with urgency. The Sheikh's brow furrowed. Trouble never sleeps. Hand in hand, they moved through the dimly lit corridors toward the council chamber, the air thick with tension and whispered doubts. Servants and guards alike bowed and whispered behind cupped hands, their eyes reflecting the unease spreading like wildfire. Inside the chamber, several advisors clustered around a polished mahogany table, their faces taut with concern. A runner awaited them, breathless and bearing a sealed scroll. The sheikh broke the seal, fingers trembling beneath golden rings. The scroll revealed news that chilled even the fire in his veins. A caravan, one carrying precious supplies destined for the mining operations, had been ambushed in the dead of night. The goods were missing, and signs pointed unmistakably to inside betrayal. Someone from the palace had orchestrated the attack, striking at the heart of the empire's fragile peace. The miner's eyes darkened, lips pressed in a thin line. Sabotage is more than a threat. It is a declaration of war. One of the elder advisors stepped forward, voice grave. Your Highness, the conspiracy may extend beyond the mines. Alliances long thought loyal now hang in delicate balance. The Sheikh's jaw clenched, the ornate room suddenly feeling suffocating. Then we must shine light into every shadow, he decided with steel beneath the softness. She reached for his hand again, the calloused skin contrasting with his own, but grounding him like an anchor in the rising storm. You cannot afford to be blinded by titles or fear. The truth will set your empire free, or bury it alive. His voice lowered with a rare vulnerability. And yet, the deeper I look, the more I fear what shadows might swallow us whole. Night gave way to a restless dawn. The palace stirred alive with guards sharpening swords and courtiers plotting in hushed corners. But in the quiet moments before the first light caught the curves of minarets and mosaics, the sheikh and the miner shared a silent promise. Their alliance was fragile, a thread stretched taut between worlds of silk and soil. But it was real, born of shared secrets and forged through whispered admissions under star-studded skies. As the sun's rays breached the chambers, a sharp knock shattered the fragile calm. A courier entered, his face pale but determined. Your Highness, he said, voice tight and urgent. An intercepted message has revealed names linked to the conspiracy. The truth runs deeper than we imagined. The Sheikh's storm-dark eyes snapped to the messenger. Names. He unfolded the paper, eyes scanning rapidly as a cold recognition settled in his bones. The whisper in the corridors, The sting of betrayal, now given flesh and name. He turns slowly, locking eyes with the miner. Heart pounding against his chest, like a trapped bird desperate for freedom. One name stood out, a name intertwined with her past, a shadow from the curse she once spoke of with trembling voice. "You hid this from me," he said low, a mixture of pain and disbelief coloring his words. "No," she replied fiercely, the hint of defiance lighting her gaze. "I was protecting you, protecting us. But the time for secrets has passed." A bitter silence wrapped around them, thick as the desert night. Footsteps echoed beyond the door, heralding a presence no one anticipated. The palace felt the shift, a new player stepping into an ancient game. And then a voice, smooth and deadly, slithered into the chamber like poison. "Sheikh," it said, "the serpent you seek wears a familiar face, one that smiles in your halls and prays beneath your roof." The room frozen. The Sheikh's gaze sharpened with unyielding steel. The war for his empire and his heart was no longer a distant blade. It was poised for the killing strike. And beneath the polished chandeliers and the unending desert sky, the billionaire sheikh understood. The next move belonged to the enemy, and the price of failure would be ruin beyond measure. The heavy oak doors shut behind them with a hollow thud, sealing the charged silence that hung between the billionaire sheikh and the shadowed courtier who had just delivered his venomous warning. The air thickened, saturated with the scent of sandalwood and the faint trace of jasmine from the night's blossoms outside the window. But inside the palace, tension clung tighter than any perfume. The sheikh's eyes narrowed, sharp as obsidian, scanning the man's face for signs of jest or deception. There was none. Only cold calculation lived behind that smile, an ambition that threatened to consume all in its path. "You say the serpent wears a familiar face," the sheikh rumbled, voice low but laced with steel. "Then name this traitor. I deserve to know who betrays his own blood." The courtier hesitated, as if savoring the moment, then shook his head slowly. "Soon enough, Your Highness. The moment to reveal all will come. For now, patience is your only shield." Frustration coiled inside the sheikh's chest like a restless viper. Yet he restrained himself. Years of ruling had taught him the ruthless game of patience and timing. His gaze flicked to the miner. Her expression remained stoic, yet the tightening of her jaw betrayed the weight of secrets she carried. The air between them pulsed with unspoken promises and threatening shadows. "I will not allow shadows to devour my empire," the sheikh declared, stepping closer to the woman whose defiant spirit had become a beacon in his darkened world. "Together, we hunt this poison." Her eyes met his, steady and unwavering. "No more walls. No more secrets," she whispered. A sudden breath of wind stirred the heavy curtains, and with it came the sound of hurried footsteps. The trusted aide entered, urgency etched on his face. "Your Highness," he began without preamble, "a message just arrived from the southern borders. The caravan you dispatched, the one carrying vital supplies for the mining operations, is missing. It was ambushed, and the attackers left no survivors." The words landed like a dagger, sharp and cold. The miner's breath caught, a shadow passing over her features. The Sheikh's fingers clenched reflexively at his side, the polished marble beneath them seeming to grow colder, harder. "Sabotage," the aide continued, voice grave. "Signs point to orchestration from within the palace. A message from the shadows, meant to destabilize your reign." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant drifting chant of desert winds against stone walls. The miner stepped forward, her voice low and fierce. "This is no simple act of rebellion. It's war, a war waged not with swords, but with betrayal. The foundations of your empire are cracking, and those who smile in your presence may be the ones dropping it to ruin." The Sheikh's gaze locked on hers, a tempest raging behind those dark eyes. He had heard the whispers, felt the tremors of unrest, but now the veil was ripped away. The enemy was not only outside, the venom had seeped deep within. "Tell me everything," he commanded softly, the weight of command mingling with a rare vulnerability. "Every name, every shadow." She hesitated, pain bleeding into the lines of her face. "There is one, someone you once called ally. Someone whose loyalty was as false as the gold lining your robes. Their name is a curse I have carried in silence." His pulse quickened. "Who?" The question slipped out, brittle and urgent. Before she could answer, the heavy doors creaked again, admitting a figure cloaked in dusk and intrigue. The room seemed to grow colder. The newcomer's smile was slow, sinister, a serpent coiling before the strike. "Sheikh," he said, voice smooth as silk, but edged with venom. "I see trust has become your greatest vulnerability. But beware. The blade that wounds you deepest wears the face of friendship." The Sheikh's reply was a whisper, a vow thick with ice and fire. "I will unmask the traitor, no matter the cost." The miner's hand found his, fingers curling tightly in solidarity. The contrast of her rough palm against his silk was a grounding truth amidst the swirling storm. Outside, the desert's cold night pressed closer, the stars winking down like distant witnesses to a war yet to fully ignite. Step by measured step, the Sheikh prepared to confront the darkness within and without. Yet, beneath his armor of power, a fragile truth burned brighter than gold. The hope that this woman, this miner with scars deeper than the desert sands, might be the light to guide him through the coming night. As the first pale hints of dawn seeped into the palace, a sudden sharp knock shattered the fragile calm. A messenger burst in, breathless and wild-eyed. "Your Highness," he gasped, clutching a folded parchment. "New intelligence. The conspirators move faster than expected. One of your closest confidants has been seen conspiring with enemies across the border. The name is..." Before the words could fully escape, a sudden explosion rocked the palace. The great hall trembled, dust cascading from the gilded ceiling. Torches flickered and went out, plunging the chamber into darkness, save for the eerie glow of flickering lanterns. The Sheikh's heart thundered as the room filled with shouts and alarm. Amid the chaos, the miner tightened her grip on his hand, eyes wide and unwavering. "This is just the beginning," she whispered, fiercely. And in that suspended moment, beneath the shattered chandeliers and the looming shadows, the billionaire Sheikh felt the world shift, not only beneath his feet, but within his very soul. The battle for his empire, for his heart, was no longer a distant threat. It had arrived, relentless, roaring, and unforgiving. The dawn crept softly over the emirate, casting a gentle light that seemed to soothe even the deepest wounds. Within the grand palace, the weight of treachery had finally begun to lift, replaced by a quiet resolve that filled the gilded halls like a rising tide. The billionaire sheikh stood tall but unguarded, his eyes no longer clouded by suspicion, but clear with newfound purpose. Beside him, the miner, her hands still rough from the earth, her spirit as unyielding as ever, shared a glance full of unspoken understanding. Together, they had faced the shadows that threatened not only their worlds, but the fragile threads of trust weaving them closer. The traitor's name had been revealed, an unexpected confidant who had sought to unravel the sheikh's reign from within. Confronted with undeniable evidence, the conspirator's mask had crumbled, exposing the venom beneath. Justice moved swiftly. Loyal guards executed the decree of the sheikh, cleansing the palace of the poison that had seeped so dangerously deep. Yet the true victory lay beyond mere survival. The sheikh extended a steady hand to the miner, a silent promise that this time he would not retreat behind walls of pride or power. His voice, when it came, was low but resolute. My empire is no longer mine alone. It belongs to those who live and breathe its sands, even those who toil beneath its surface. Her eyes glistened with the first tears he had ever been witness to falling unashamed. Tears born not of weakness, but of hard-won hope. And it is more than gold or rulership, she whispered softly. It is about honor, respect, and love. In the days that followed, the palace transformed, not only in its walls, but in the hearts of those within. The sheikh opened lines of communication to the laborers, dismantling the barriers between privilege and hardship. The miner emerged, not simply as a symbol of defiance, but as a trusted advisor, her voice a beacon for justice and compassion. Their evenings, once filled with guarded silence and unspoken fears, became moments of shared laughter and quiet closeness. Beneath the moonlit balconies, far from the prying eyes of courtiers and conspirators, they found solace in each other, a sanctuary where vulnerability was not punished but cherished. The desert winds whispered of renewal as the palace gardens bloomed with vibrant life, a testament to the new era dawning within the emirate. Petals unfurled under the golden sun, mirroring the blossoming love and unity that had taken root despite the barren trials they had endured. One afternoon, amidst the fragrance of jasmine and the soft murmur of running water, the sheikh presented the miner with a simple, intricately carved pendant, an ancient emblem of the desert tribe she belonged to. It was more than a gift. It was an acknowledgement of her strength, resilience, and the bond that now united their paths forever. She accepted it with a steady smile, her fingers brushing his in a touch that spoke volumes. "We have come through the storm," she said with quiet certainty. Together, their union was celebrated beyond the palace walls, a beacon of hope and change for the people. The marriage was not just of two souls, but of worlds once distant, The luxury of the golden chambers, harmonizing with the humble courage of the desert sands. Children's laughter soon echoed through the halls, a joyful promise of continuity and peace. The Sheikh's once cold heart had thawed into warmth, a man transformed, not by riches or power, but by the love that dared to heal wounds deep as desert canyons. In the final quiet moments, beneath the stars that had borne witness to their trials, they stood side by side. His hand found hers effortlessly, fingers intertwining in a grip that was both promise and pride. "No longer shall I walk alone," the Sheikh murmured. "And I will never let you," she replied, her eyes shining with unwavering trust. The palace no longer echoed with fear or betrayal. It thrummed with life, hope, and the steadfast beat of two hearts intertwined. As the sun rose higher, its light spilled over the dunes, gilding the emirate in hues of gold and rose. A new chapter had begun, not just for the Sheikh and the miner, but for all who called this land home. In that moment, beneath the endless desert sky, the billionaire Sheikh finally understood what true power meant. The courage to love without fear, to trust beyond doubt, and to lead with a heart unburdened by shadows. Their story was no longer one of secrets and sorrow, but of redemption and radiant love, a legacy that would shine brighter than all the treasures of the sand. And so, amidst the whispering winds and blossoming gardens, they walked forward, together, into a future forged by love, honor, and the unbreakable strength found only in unity.